Both teams getting ready. Today's the media day, the preparation day, a day where the managers are being bugged about who's on the rosters. Starting for game one tomorrow, it's 107 first pitch in the afternoon. But, Jim Hewer, what we do know, and again, we'll pass along any additional information. What we do know, Jose Quintana will start game one. Miles Miklasz will start game two. The Phillies, as we talked about yesterday, Zach Wheeler in game one and Aaron Nola in game two. So Quintana and Michaelis, no surprise. It was just a matter of perhaps who would, which order they would go in, talking about the two Cardinals. But Quintana's a good matchup, based on his performance. I mean, every game's different. You can't assume anything. But the thing about Quintana is he keeps the ball in the ballpark, and that's going to be a big deal in this series because the Phillies love to hit home runs. They binge on home runs. So Quintana has allowed one home run as a Cardinal and only 7 or 8 all season. And even though he's a lefty, and he's really good against lefties, left-handed batters, and the Phillies have a lot of dangerous guys in that area, Quintana's really good against right-handed batters as well because he gets a lot of ground balls, and again, he keeps the ball in the yard. So I think Ali Marmol made the decision that I believed he was going to make the entire time. And, people are writing columns and doing so, he needs to do that. No, he was going to start Quintana all along. I mean, when I say all along, I think it became pretty obvious based on his own hints that he was dropping. That Quintana, like over the last couple weeks, made that decision. Just a matter of a formality. So that's that. Also, what else we got? No Tyler O'Neill, and that ain't exactly stop the presses stuff. Okay, we're okay. I think we knew that. We'll see him again. Maybe he'll be able to play. 2024 season, something like that. Anyway, Zach Thompson, the rookie lefty, is going to be in the bullpen. So you're going to have Matz and Thompson as left-handed relievers in the bullpen. Will they add a third, and who would the third be? Going to be Cabrera or Packy Naughton? It would have to be Cabrera. I mean, Packy had his 15 minutes. I appreciate him, but I don't know how great his stuff is anymore. And I think Cabrera, they say, the reports, I know the box scores weren't good, but the reports as far as the movement on his pitches and the swing and miss stuff, he made some improvements down in Memphis. So I'm inclined to just kind of disregard some of those ugly numbers in his pitching line. I think he had to go down there and just get things cranked up again, and people had to see the swing and miss. And I think the Cardinals believe they saw enough of it. Now, will they put him on the postseason roster? We'll have to wait and see. Do you carry a third lefty? Well, you have to wait and see. A lot of it would have to do if it's a 3-game series. Because then in the third game, do you start a Jordan Montgomery? Or do you say, Jack Flaherty, here you go. And Jordan Montgomery, you can pitch out of the bullpen. I don't know. Because, if you start thinking about it along those lines, first of all, I would expect that Ali Marmol will, tap on Jack Flaherty to come in maybe in the first game in relief of Quintana. See, that's the saying. The old school formulas are out, and the sort of paint by numbers managing, it's out. We keep talking about it, and I think everyone knows now. We will see some surprising things, some unconventional things, perhaps, from Ali Marmol. I mean, if you're looking for the old connect the dots thing, that's not what this is. So you may see a starter come into the game in relief of or just to replace the guy who started the game. Even if the guy who started the game is pitching pretty well, you may see a Jack Flaherty in there. We'll just have to wait and see how it plays out, but just don't assume anything. I see things online, people are slotting this player here and that player there. I don't think it's going to work that way. I think Ali Marmol is going to be moving pieces all over the place, and it might not always be conventional. Jim Hewer, I got to take a drink of water because I've been talking nonstop. So how you doing, man?
I am doing quite all right, and I love that you laid it out there. There's just going to be decisions galore that could change within this series, what we'll see this weekend, and I'm looking forward to that as much as anything. As a guy who loves to sit and watch and strategize and then try and figure out what a manager's doing, I think that'll be one of the more fun things to find out. Now, it won't be fun if your team is a losing team, and then you go, oh, why do you do this? Why do you do that? But it's the game's managed differently. It's played differently in the playoffs. And this roster has a lot of pieces that can get moved around. So there's just so many things to keep an eye on. I really am looking forward to how this thing goes. Plus, it's only a 3-game series. Blink and it's over. You know,
it's over is right. That's exactly, yeah, for sure. And I said, like today, if anybody listens to the podcast, you'll be laughing at me, and you can, Seeing Red Podcast, because I was trying to explain something I said yesterday on the show. It's like, well, look, as long as the Cardinals can win, one of these first 2 games, I'm fine. They can get to Game 3. That's what I tried to say. But the way I said it at first was like, look, if they can win these first 2 games, that would be great. That would be great. That'd be pretty cool. And then you got Game 3. I'm like, well, wait a minute. No. If they win the first 2 games, the damn thing's over. So, yeah, let's root for that. But, I just meant that if they should lose the first game, the Cardinals, to Zach Wheeler, it's okay as long as you get one of the first 2. And that's where I kind of was acting stupid on the podcast. What else is new? If you get one of the first 2, you still have a chance. However, if you do not get one of the first 2, let me think. Let me use my brain here. If you do not win one of the first 2, I think you're in trouble. Oh no, actually, you're going home. That's what it is. So I don't want them to go home just yet.
Yeah, here's the thing. We're going to talk about it a lot, but I think Wheeler is so good. He could shut it down, and you'd be going, holy cow. You feel like you went into a slump without really going into a slump because he's that good. And Nola could do the same thing, and before you know it, it's Saturday night at 10 o'clock. You go, what just happened? I mean, that's how this thing could turn out. Not hoping it, but their 2 guys are that good. And that's what I think is another sideline or storyline we want to call to this series. You could make all your moves, but if Zach Wheeler is Cy Young type Zach Wheeler, you're going to have a tough day.
What you got to do, if Wheeler's really, really good, then it's going to be imperative for, Quintana, obviously. It's imperative anyway. It's not like you want to spot the Phillies a 4-0 lead in Game 1. And I just want to talk Game 1 now. I don't want to jump ahead too much. Quintana's got to do what Quintana has done literally in just about every start he's made for the Cardinals. I mean, there was 1 or 2 where, he may have only given up 2 earned runs, but he wasn't at his best. But he's still a really cagey, resourceful guy. So even if he's a little off, he's still really good. He's very resourceful. He's very tough. He's so smart. So if Wheeler's really on, man, if he's locked in, he's really on. Number one, Quintana's going to have to match it the best he can for as long as he can. And even if the Cardinals are down, 1-0, 2-1, something like that, that's okay. You still have a good chance to win. I'll get to one quick reason on that in a minute. But that also may prompt Ali Marmol to go to his bullpen faster. Not because, to use a boxing metaphor, not that because Jose Quintana will be on the ropes bleeding, with a cut over his eye and, something coming out of his nostrils. Not from the standpoint that Quintana's getting beaten up really bad, but just if, say the Cardinals are down by a run, say they're down 2-0, and say it's the 4th inning, and say that, Quintana walks someone and then somebody gets a hit. During the regular season, you keep him in, you don't worry about it. You trust him to get you another inning or 2 and to limit the damage. But you get in the 4th inning and you're down to Zach Wheeler, and Wheeler's really good. You're like, all right, I got to put the brakes on right here. We got to make sure this game stays exactly where it is on the scoreboard. And as much as we like Quintana, I think this guy, is it Jack Flaherty? I mean, is it Palante? I don't know. I think we got to get him in. So that's the type of thing. Just got to keep it close. And if Quintana gets into some trouble and Marmol's a little, really going to go for it as far as fast-forwarding that bullpen into the game, I don't have a problem with the philosophy of that. Tony La Russa did it in 2011. But what I mean is, the only thing is then you got to hope that the bullpen gets the job done. And the bullpens, I think, are going to be really, really important in this brief skirmish that the Phillies and the Cardinals are having. Real quick, because I wanted to mention it. I think the Cardinals would have a very hard time getting through cracking the late innings if they're down or down by a run or they're tied, whatever it may be, because Zach Eflin has pitched great in relief, back end of games. And Alvarado, the left-hander, has pitched crazily good. We talked about it yesterday at Friendlies. Since early August, the dude's got like a 48% strikeout rate. He's allowed one run. So I think it's good. You got to give respect to the other side when it's warranted. I think the Phillies are going to be very tough to crack, say in the 8th, 9th innings. But they're soft in the middle. They have a couple of their setup guys, David Robertson being one, and Dominguez being another. And these guys are going to have to handle that middle those bridge innings from Wheeler to you get into the 8th inning. Maybe they're going to have to cover a couple innings. But Dominguez has been getting lit up all month. When I say month, I mean since the start of September. And David Robertson's a really good pitcher, but he's in this little stretch where he's walking way too many guys. And I was reading the pieces written by the Philadelphia writers, and they're just saying they say the Phillies are a little concerned about getting to those two strong relievers at the end. So if the Cardinals can keep it close, the point is that I'm sharing is that I think they will have a chance to do some damage in the middle innings after the starter leaves before they get to Eflin and Alvarado.
They're gonna, as your numbers point out, you kind of make it a 7-inning game at that point. So you're going to have to find a way, and I'm excited to see if the guys at the top of the order. We'll see what the lineup is, tomorrow. But I would kind of probably go with Donovan Nootbaar to try and run up pitch counts. And
that's what you got to do. You have to do it.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a choice because those guys are the best guys to put up there with a right-hander going. There's no doubt.
And they get on base, create a couple problems, and get a couple runs, and that's recipe for success right now with this pitching matchup.
Yeah, and and Wheeler, isn't that far removed from missing a little time.
True.
And I'm not implying that he's vulnerable, but maybe there will be he'll be a little bit below kind of fearsome level.
Yeah.
And that's why you got to grind out those at bats. I think and I'm telling you, Donovan will do it, and you'll know that Nootbaar will do it. And then if they try to come in on Nootbaar or whatever, I mean, he's a really dangerous hitter. I think he's one of the keys to the entire Cardinals postseason for however it lasts, how long it lasts. I'll get this right. It's a situation where really he can be a really impact player in this series, and. Since you started talking the lineup, the one thing that concerns everybody, listen, Will Leach and I talked about it in Seeing Red that's now online at 590thefan.com and through the 590 The Fan app, where it's just some brief thoughts on this series. And we both agreed because I think everyone agrees. This is not a unique opinion. This is a shared opinion. I don't see how they win the series if Goldschmidt doesn't hit and Arenado doesn't do a lot. I just don't see how. Now, some people would say, well, wait a minute now. Hey, if it's low-scoring games, Pujols can win it for him. He could. But if you're the Phillies and Rob Thompson, the interim manager, has done such a great job, if Goldschmidt's not hitting, if he's still dormant, and if Arenado's not hitting the way you were fearing that he would, why would you give Albert Pujols anything to hit? Like, what would be the point of challenging him? I mean, if Goldie's coming up, first of all, it could be a third out of the inning if he's batting third. But even if there's a runner on, maybe let's say Donovan or Nootbaar doubles, and Goldie comes up, nothing happens. And then Arenado presumably next, nothing happens. Well, why the hell would you pitch to Albert Pujols? See, that's why it isn't just that they need to get these two guys going again. It's imperative. It's mandatory. They have to get going again. But it doesn't just affect, the two of them coming up empty, let's say, or coming up short. Then it affects what Albert Pujols can do because it would change the way the Phillies see him. And it would change the Phillies' aggressiveness level and how they're going to pitch to him. So Those two guys have a lot to do with what Albert Pujols, the role he will play in this series. You know, they'll either have to pitch to him or they can avoid him. So if those two guys don't hit, see you in Jupiter. They ain't going to win a series.
No, I can't disagree with that at all. And, you know, he talked about pitching around Pujols. Immediately, as you said, it reminded me, I think it was 2009 short playoff. Joe Torre was the manager with the Dodgers then, and he would not pitch to Albert there. And Cardinals had trouble finding a way.
They did.
And got eliminated. Obviously, there were other things that went on in that series, but that I specifically remember he just pitched around Albert, said, nah, not even going to give you a sniff. And to your point, the other two guys are going to have to step up to avoid that opportunity for the Phillies, for sure.
The Phillies and the Cardinals both rely on home runs, and I think the Cardinals may have a little more diversity of offense, but contrary to what you hear all the time on TV and, you know, a lot of writers, it's just no, they're not a small ball team. They do manufacturing when it makes sense to try to get a run in. They can do that pretty well, you know. But if you look at their productive outs and things like that, it's just not. There's nothing there to see really. They're not. They don't play that kind of game. So the Cardinals are very dependent on home runs, and that's the way it is for most teams. So the Cardinals aren't in some kind of like, oh, I can't believe they're this dumb. It isn't that at all. If the guys that are supposed to hit are hitting, getting hits, getting doubles, you know, just banging the ball around doesn't necessarily have to be home runs. They have a lot of doubles hitters when the guys are going right. I mean, it isn't just home runs. When the Cardinals were really rolling there, you know, from start of the All-Star break or the resumption of play after the All-Star break until about early September, I mean, they were hitting doubles all over the place. So they just wanted to restate my position, man. I love doubles. I wish we'd see more of them from the Cardinals. It ain't just home runs, but power has got to be a big part of their game. Just like Ali Marmol says, on base percentage, doubles, homers. That's what they are. And that is so tried and true in terms of a determining factor, wins or loss, right? So I gave you the recognizing that there's a good possibility whoever wins the home run battle, the team that wins that, is going to win the series. You know, I'm going to go to my go-to stat because I use it a lot, but it's such a great stat. It's really kind of like, wow. Every time I go over this, you know, the Cardinals this year in the regular season, when they hit 2 home runs in a game, 2 home runs or more in a game, their record is 49-9. I mean, that's just absolutely nuts. But that's also a very definitive pattern. And it's not, as you can tell, because there were 9 losses in there. It doesn't mean that they're going to win 100% of the time. But over 162 games, when you go 49-9, when you hit 2 or more home runs in that game, I mean, that's about as great of a trend or as meaningful a trend as you can hope to find. And it's pretty hard to, like, you know, poke a hole in it. It's pretty obvious that that's the way to the winner's circle for the Cardinals. The Phillies have done well in those type of games, but not nearly as good as the Cardinals. But here's the thing that jumped out at me when I was doing my morning homework. The Powerball contest. And I just gave you the stat that's really my go-to on this. But since the All-Star break, here we go, Jim Hewer. Here we go,
okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Since the All-Star break, the Cardinals lead the majors in home runs hit with 98.
Really?
And it gets better. The Cardinals lead they lead the majors in home runs since the All-Star break. They also lead the majors in something else. Fewest home runs allowed. So the St. Louis Cardinals since the All-Star break, they've hit more home runs than anybody, and they've given up fewer home runs than anybody. So if you're asking me I don't bet on baseball really. But if I were to think about investments, I'm like, well, we all agree, man. You're not going to be able to bundle a bunch of hits against Wheeler and Noah. You're probably not going to be able to bundle a bunch of hits against Quintana and Miklasz. Maybe you could if it's one of those days where the ball just is getting hit to a place where a fielder isn't. But if we're talking ground balls or things like that, the Cardinals defense will win that every time. Anyway, but if we agree that home runs are going to be huge in this series, well, I kind of like the idea of going into the series with the number one home run team since the All-Star break and the number one team at preventing home runs since the All-Star break. If we go by that lengthy pattern, man, that bodes well for the Cardinals. But again, you have to execute, and you got to make sure you sustain that. You can't take it for granted. But that's a good sign.
That is a stat, Bernie. I never thought I would see a Cardinal team leading it in home runs since the All-Star break.
In both areas.
Yeah, I mean that's super stats. I just all those other high-priced lineups we got around Major League Baseball, and Cardinals led that. That's super impressive. And then the flip side, like you said, just not allowing home runs.
Right.
That's great.
Cardinals starting for the whole season. Cardinals starting pitchers. Well, actually, there's a couple different ways to do this. When they reordered the pitching staff in early August, the trade deadline, but Cardinals starting pitchers as a group, they give up about depending when the time frame you want to use, but they give up about an average of like 0.6 home runs per 9 innings, and then since the trades were made, that's like 0.5 home runs per 9 innings. I mean, you pretty much can't do any better than that. This is the hardest team. The starting pitchers, but the team overall is consistently the most difficult team to hit a home run against this season. And the fact that they are home makes it even tougher for teams to try to hit long balls, go to the air game against the St. Louis Cardinals. And I think that this could be a really, really huge thing in this series, to say the least, right?
Oh, yeah. Look, you and I discussed it. That's how the games are won or lost in the playoffs, more than likely. You got to have guys that can hit home runs over the wall.
So if you look at it this way, all right, home run battle, who's going to win? All right, what about the home run differential? And what I mean by that, you take the number of home runs that your team hit and you subtract the number of home runs that your team allowed. And then you have the number. With the Cardinals, it's like 98 minus 53. Well, that's a home run differential plus 45. The Phillies, plus 19. So that's a pretty big gap.
And bigger gap, yes.
So you better hope that this is actually going to come down to a home run contest, because the Cardinals, at least over 162 games, well, I should say since the All-Star break, when they really start to get their act together, second half of the season, it's kind of like a no contest. They've been great in this area, so and really good about preventing home runs all year, and that's not a surprise considering the ballpark that they play in. So, it's that's definitely like, if I put a checklist together, I haven't per se. That would be, other than Goldie coming alive again and Arenado having his first decent postseason ever. Other than that, that's at the top. And and that also fits into, well, which Cardinals offense is going to show up here? Is it going to be the one that from July 10th to early September led Major League Baseball virtually in everything offensively? Is it that one? Or is it going to be the tired, kind of dull, maybe disinterested team that kind of slogged through September because they knew they had the division wrapped up, even though it wasn't officially wrapped up? So which offense is going to show up? That's on my checklist. Is Paul Goldschmidt going to return? Is he actually going to come back to life? Is Arenado going to handle the pressure of the postseason? He didn't as a Rocky, and he was 0 for 4 as a Cardinal in the wild card game last year, left some people on base. So it's those two things for sure. Then we get into stuff like, all right, which team's going to win the home run battle? And you know where I would have my money bet, just because of the numbers I just provided. So it's going to be fun. The other thing, and we can revisit this, and I think a lot of Cardinals fans know this already. Listen, the Phillies have a lot of good, dangerous left-handed batters, right? But I still think that it's going to come down, or a lot of it's going to come down. You don't let Bryce Harper or Kyle Schwarber beat you. And there's an encouraging way to look at both of those guys, and from a St. Louis standpoint. Let's start with Harper. Since he returned, he was on the IL for 2 months, basically, with a fractured finger. He returned August of 26. He's hitting 227. He's slugging just a little bit over 350, which is bad. And he's only got 3 home runs and 128 at-bats. So when you say, well, they can't let Harper beat him, they can't, but they caught an advantage there, and that unfortunately, because I don't like to see anybody get hurt. He got hurt, and he hasn't been the same hitter since he returned. That doesn't mean he can't find some thunder and lightning or generate it. He can, but he hasn't. Up to this point, he has not been the same guy. Now, this is the thing I know a lot of Cardinal fans are familiar with, although I'll give you the numbers about it. Kyle Schwarber's got a really quiet history at Busch Stadium. And I was really surprised because I knew that in general terms. I was really surprised to see the numbers, though. He's played 35 career games, regular season, at Busch Stadium. He's hit 165 there. His slugging percentage, Jim, is under 300. And he's only hit 4 home runs and 127 at-bats, plus a 26% strikeout rate. I mean, the Cardinals have been very fortunate that they've been able to do a number on Schwarber to the point that they have, to the extent that they have. And he's coming in, man, dangerous. He's got 46 home runs, slugging over 500, leads the league in home runs. But for whatever reason, he's never been comfortable or confident or productive when he steps in the batter's box at Busch Stadium. And they got to keep it that way for the next 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, I didn't realize his numbers were that low. I remember a lot of games at Wrigley Field where it was the other way around. But to your point, it's not where it's at. It's here. And that is super low. I would have not guessed that would have been that low.
And that's why, we talk about home field advantage, but the Cardinals really do have a genuine home field advantage. And that can't be understated. They're very, very fortunate to have all 3 of these games if it goes 3. They're fortunate to have the setting of Busch Stadium because their winning percentage is great there. The Phillies have a losing road record this season. The Phillies are okay on the road, but their offensive statistics as a bundle, it's pretty much right around average on the road. And the Cardinals do a great job of preventing runs at Busch Stadium. And they do a surprisingly good job because of the way the ballpark has played in the past. But they do a surprisingly good job, your St. Louis Cardinals, of scoring runs at Busch Stadium. They're averaging 4.83 runs per game there this year. And they're slugging, 420, 425, something like that. So this really, truly is a home field advantage. It's not like a theory or a concept. You can see the numbers. You can see their record at home. You can see what their record at home has been since early in the season. It's been great. You can see that they've beaten some really good teams at Busch Stadium this year, including the Yankees, including the Braves. Even split with Philly. And they split with Philly at a time when the Phillies were playing great. And the Cardinals were still trying to get their pitching straightened out. And at that point, the Phillies were here, and I think the last time they played was July 11th. Pujols hadn't started to go off yet. And the Cardinals still, even though they faced Wheeler and they faced Nola, the Cardinals wrestled that team to a 2-2 split, which I think actually under the circumstances is really good. So this really, truly is a home field advantage. Now, it doesn't mean that something's guaranteed. No, but there's real tangible value to the Cardinals to play at home. This isn't like, the old home field advantage. Yeah, let's talk about the home field advantage. Let's actually specify why it is. And I just did. And I think even defensively, being at Busch Stadium makes them even better defensively. And don't forget the Phillies stink defensively. And I think they're worse defensively on the road. So you got to take advantage of what truly is a home field advantage. And it also includes what we just talked about, the Powerball aspect of this, right?
Yeah.
So it's, I think the Cardinals should win the series, frankly, You're
talking me into it. I'll be honest. I've had my doubts. And now with the numbers you just provided, I was like, well, the numbers right there are telling you what's going on here. I think you talked me into it, Bernie, because I really was going the other way because of Wheeler and Noah. I was really worried about that. But when you start throwing me numbers like that, I was like, well, maybe I'm overstating the possibility of what the Phillies can bring to their with the offense, and the Cardinals. I'm not giving them enough credit for what they could do offensively.
Well, it's still, however, this is a true home field advantage. They got it, but they have
That's
to actually
part.
make the best of it. They just have to. They got to maximize that. And they can't maximize it, in my opinion, unless, again, here we go, Goldschmidt and Arenado crank it up. And I think Arenado will, as I have said a few times. I'm not a paranoid, conspiracy-minded person at all. I just know how the Cardinals roll. And I would not be surprised if after the season, whenever it ends, we are told, well, he was playing with a bad back for the last couple months or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised by something like that at all, because you don't go from what he was doing. If it lasts a couple weeks, it's no big deal. You don't go with what he was doing most of the season, and all of a sudden, since August of 26, there's been virtually no power whatsoever.
Yes.
So that's
Agreed.
A long time.
Yep.
I mean, I know, like, you hear the broadcasts or whatever, and people talking about, well, he's been off he's been a little off the last couple weeks.
Been longer than that. You're right.
It's about a month and a half, and August 26th. We're now here at October 6th. I do believe that's more than a couple weeks. I could be wrong.
Here's the thing about him too, is when he's on, I mean, he's so solid with that swing, but when he's got a swing and miss, he's got a violent swing. And I always thought, man, I wonder if he ever has a back issue. And maybe that's what's going on. Like you said, we might find out, because when you don't get contact and he just swings as hard as he does I've always wondered that about him. So it'll be an interesting watch. But if he's right, he comes up with a couple big hits, Bernie, that everything switches the other way in Cardinals' favor drastically, because he's that good.
Joe Sheehan, our friend, he had a newsletter that just arrived a little while ago. I always like to share what he thinks of certain things. He did a newsletter, and that's why you subscribe to the Joe Sheehan newsletter. Go to joesheehan.com. You can do that. We'll get Joe on at some point next week, I hope. He did a thing where he looked at each playoff team, and he says, okay, let's identify their weakness, right?
Yeah.
And he said, I'm reading this for the first time. It's short.
Mm-hmm.
He said Cardinals. He says the Cardinals have an identity, and part of that identity is putting a good defense behind a pitch-to-contact pitching staff. That got them 93 wins in the division title. But that's a hard road in October. The Cardinals are 28th in MLB in their strikeout rate. No other playoff team ranked below 14th. No team with a strikeout rate below 20% has won a playoff series since 2015. And no team in the bottom five in strikeout rate has won a playoff series since 2007. If they lose early, it will be because they don't miss bats. See, that's why I love Joe. I mean, he identified something that could really be in play here that would lower their chances of winning, right?
Yeah.
Let's see what he says about the Phillies real quick.
Yeah, no, I like that.
Yeah. Joe Sheehan writes about the Phillies, their weakness coming in. Quote, the comical Phillies defense of the first 4 months has been fixed a bit with the addition of Brandon Marsh to play center field and the release of Didi Gregorius, which freed Bryson Stott to play shortstop. But even at that, StatCast pegged them as the second worst defensive team over the season's final month. And they're taking on a Cardinals team that puts more ball in play or put more ball in play than all but 3 teams in baseball this year. So if Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola don't miss a lot of bats, Joe Sheehan says, This one should end quickly. There you go.
Uh-huh.
See, I thought the Phillies had improved a little bit defensively, and they have. But Joe Sheehan says, however, they're still next to last over the final month in defense.
Yeah, well, he mentioned Marsh, and there was a game I know of specifically. I think I told you in one of our breaks. I said, I'm watching the highlight, and Marsh just completely buffled one out in center field at one point, where he just looked up and go, I don't know what I'm doing out here. And I was like, that's a guy they were counting on. So
may get some sun out there tomorrow, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Have to wait and see. This is kind of fun, though. This is kind of fun. I hope defense is a factor because I would say it mostly would go in the Cardinals' favor if that happens. I just don't know in a short series that's something that's going to rear its ugly head. If I'm talking about the Phillies.
Yeah.
If over several weeks or over a couple of months or 3 months, those defensive flaws can be exposed. But any team, even the worst defensive team, can go through 3 games and play pretty good defense and not screw anything up. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
You look at it that way.
Yeah, absolutely true.
So I don't know what to expect.